A major Labor Day surprise today from Premier Doug Ford and his Ontario government. This morning, Ford's housing minister, Steve Clerk, submitted his resignation from the cabinet amid accusations of corruption and incompetence over the handling of the Greenbelt. And by this evening, the province announcing a major cabinet reshuffle. There are 7 changes, including Government House Leader Paul Calandra taking over for Clerk as Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. He will remain House Leader as well. Prabmeet Sikaria becomes Minister of Transportation. Caroline Mulrooney becomes President of the Treasury Board, while Stan Cho becomes Minister of Long-Term Care. Rob Flack becomes Associate Minister of Housing. Todd McCarthy becomes Associate Minister of Transportation. Anita Tangri becomes Associate Minister of Small Business. Nonetheless, critics say the fight over the Greenbelt is far from over. Al Sweeney reports.
Just last week, Doug Ford and Steve Clerk were trying to ride out the Greenbelt controversy with no resignations.
I have confidence in Minister Clerk. He has a big file.
But things changed this morning. Clerk resigned in a message on X or Twitter. Clerk said his presence as housing minister will only cause a further distraction for Ford's administration. The resignation follows government reports slamming its handling of Greenbelt development, saying it favored certain developers, and Clerk should be reprimanded for failing to oversee the process properly.
The biggest, I would say, ethical breach in the history of the province of Ontario.
Opposition MPPs lined up to say the Greenbelt fight isn't over.
Now we have to wait for Doug Ford to call the Premier or to call the legislature back so we can return these lands back to the Greenbelt.
The Premier has to open the books. We need to see the emails. We need to talk about the missing cell phones. You know, there's brown envelopes and deception and insider trading here.
The people of Ontario are outraged that a corrupt process led to a corrupt decision.
Hamilton's mayor says the city has land to build on and doesn't need to open the Greenbelt.
I don't think the minister had any choice but to step aside. But look, I think the Greenbelt situation is untenable when it comes to not only Hamilton but the other areas of the Greenbelt that the government has decided to open up to development. There's just no logic around that move.
Because you love the environment.
Following months of protests over the Greenbelt plan, the Environmental Defence Group says they're going to keep pressure on the government despite Clerk's resignation.
This kind of move is always an attempt at political damage control. It's like trying to, cut off a gangrenous limb. But unfortunately, the rot is the Greenbelt removals themselves.
McMaster University political science professor Peter Grafe says the Ford government may still outlive this controversy with the backing of Conservative supporters, but people will be looking closely at what it does.
I think what it will do is make it a lot harder for the government going forward, because every new program that they bring forward, I think people will be a bit more skeptical and be looking a bit more to say, well, who's really being served by this? Is it the public interest or some kind of private interest?
Premier Ford commented on the resignation today on social media, thanking Clerk and saying his government's work on the housing file won't stop. Al Sweeney, CHCH News.